Hey, it's Deb. Welcome to my channel. Hey, welcome back to part 2 of my crazy labor and delivery story. 56 hours. If you haven't watched part 1, I'm going to link it right here. I'd recommend going back, taking a look, and hearing about how we ended up at the hospital 24 hours after I started my natural labor. It would mean the world to me if you'd subscribe to this channel and like this video. I'm really excited to bring more content like this where I give you an honest look into what it's like to be pregnant, into what it's like for postpartum and for motherhood from my millennial perspective. Let's go ahead and jump right back in where we left off. And another thing that bothered me, when the shift changed, they kept coming in and they asked me 2 or 3 times, well, are you going to do an epidural? And, I didn't want to make that decision yet. I wanted to make that decision when I needed to make that decision. So I remember walking into the room, checking in, doing all the things I needed to check in. And I walked in and my spirits were crushed because they didn't have wireless monitoring for me. And when I did my hospital tour, which I'm going to film another one on this, let me know if you'd like me to film about this, about things I wish I would have asked during the hospital tour, but they had said that every room's equipped for wireless monitoring. So in my mind, I'm thinking, awesome, every room has wireless monitoring. Not true. That means that every room can have wireless monitoring, but they only had 2 devices that they could use for wireless monitoring. So of course I get there and both of the devices are in use and they're not going to take it off somebody else to give it to me. And so those same cords, literally this long, that's what they wanted me to do. So at this point, I knew that there's no way I could sit in that bed and labor for however much longer it was going to be, because at this point we're over 24 hours when I check into the hospital and I get all the way in there, and there's no way if it's going to take another 24 hours, I can sit for 24 hours and just endure that. So I just gave up at this point. I needed to take a nap. If I couldn't be walking, I couldn't progress my labor. So I went ahead and got an epidural. So they had the epidural. The anesthesiologist come in to do the epidural. It took them 2 tries, 45 minutes, and they have this really cool handheld new technology that's a handheld ultrasound to find the space in between my back. But so it took them a while. They got the epidural in. So now we're Wednesday morning and I go ahead and I go to sleep. So I woke up around 1 o'clock, super refreshed. I mean, this is like the best nap I'd ever had. It was only like 2 hours or 3 hours, but it felt like I'd slept for like 24 hours. I felt amazing. My pain was gone, and so I was getting pretty excited. I had a great nurse. The best nurse I had the whole time I was in the hospital was this nurse I had at this point. And so she came in, she checked me. I had progressed to an 8 at this point, so I continued progressing. And then I progressed to a 9. So at this point they said, I didn't know this, but your cervix doesn't dilate perfectly. Like, it can dilate a little bit on one side or the other. So I had a little bit left on my left side to dilate, and also my water hadn't broken. So my nurse kept telling me, you know what, if your water breaks, you are going to go into labor. That's all you're waiting on. And so I'll actually insert a clip here of me putting on makeup, because I was so certain at this point, man, I'm going to have a baby today, June 12th. I have a little letterboard. We even put June 12th on it because we were like, today's the day we're going to have the baby. So we decided to wait. My contractions were super great and strong and consistent still. I was feeling great, not drinking water because they wouldn't even let you have water, but eating ice chips and really just trying to take care of myself. So I kept waiting and kept waiting and kept waiting, got all the way to 10 p.m. We had shift change and I had a new doctor. So the doctor came in to check me, and the doctor checked me, and she did a really, really vigorous check, which they said sometimes doctors do this, and this is something I'm not a big fan of. But basically when she checked me so roughly that it broke my water. So this whole entire time, I've been almost up to a 10 and we're just waiting for my water to break. She comes in, doesn't even speak to me, walks in next to the bedside, checks me, water breaks. She goes, oh, you're actually at a 7, and then gets up and leaves. And she also ordered a bag of pitocin for my room without talking to me, which none of these things were okay with me, but that's just what ended up happening. And so, I was really deflated at this point because I was so excited. At this point, we're getting pretty close to it being 48 hours. And now I'm being told that I'm not at a 9, I'm actually at a 7, which if you remember, I had been at a 6, 9 a.m. when I'd come in. So this was over 12 hours since I've actually been in the hospital laboring. And Now I'm at a 7, which is only 1 centimeter more than what I was at before. So I decided to labor overnight, see how it goes. And then also at this point, since she had broken my water, I'm on a time clock. I only have 24 hours. So I really had to get things going. Otherwise, I was going to have to get a C-section or risk getting an infection or something happening to Hadley. So I labored that night. The nurse came in, the night nurse. She was not very good. She tried to put me in 100 different positions with the peanut ball. I did not get very good sleep. It was just altogether aggravating. So in the morning, I woke up and thankfully the doctor changed because I was not a fan of that doctor. So a new doctor came in with the resident and they talked to me. And at this point, I had decided I'm not going to let anybody check me except for the doctor because people had been all over the place telling me things. And the doctor confirmed that I was a 7, maybe an 8. And again, I had that left side that still hadn't dilated as much. And so we decided to make the decision to do some pitocin because, I just had to get something going. So they put me, normally your dose of pitocin, you start at 6 at my hospital at least, and you increase by 1 or 2 every 30 minutes. And I believe the highest number is 24. But my contractions had been so strong, and it wasn't really a lack of contractions that was keeping me from dilating. I think it was a combination of the epidural and laying down for so long kind of halted my labor. And then when my water broke, sometimes it's common for you to shrink back up. Unfortunately, that happened to me. And so we put pitocin on, but we put it at the lowest level at 2. And one thing I'd read about pitocin contractions is they're a lot stronger because the hormone, it's basically a synthetic hormone that your body creates, but the pitocin is just a synthetic form of that hormone, and it helps to keep your body, doing contractions. But instead of your body getting to control when it needs to take a break and when it needs to pick up with contractions, you just have them constant. And so they can be harder on the baby. And I was concerned at this point that we'd been in labor for over 48 hours that something was going to happen to Hadley. So we decided to start at 2, and which is the lowest dose they would agree to, and just to see how it went, and if we needed to increase, we increased, and so that's kind of where we started. So we got from a 2 to a 3 all the way up to a 4. And so we got to a 4 around, I'd say 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And at this point, my contractions were outrageous. Now remember, I have an epidural. So I have an epidural and the epidural's working. It's been great so far. It's worked well. I haven't really needed anything from an anesthesiologist to come check it. The epidural was working fine, and my contractions were just so intense. It was just so much pressure. So I wasn't having pain, but it became pressure. It just felt like, honestly, it felt like there was a person inside of me trying to just pry its way out. That's the best way I can describe it. And so I just decided, you know what, you're just going to tough it out because you do not want to have a C-section. Because for me, again, terrified of hospitals, do not want to have a surgery. Some people choose to do them, and that's great. And, I'm happy if you decided to do that. But for me personally, I did not want to do that. I really wanted to go at it naturally. Also, it makes subsequent pregnancies, you really have to have them via C-section, and I didn't want that to be my only option. I wanted to, for my next pregnancy, be able to decide if I wanted to do a C-section or if I wanted to do a vaginal birth, and I didn't want to have the risk of, a uterine rupture. And so I decided I'm just going to tough it out. So I sit there and it's just pressure. The contractions were just like constant. There was no more of this, rising and falling, and we're only at a 4, mind you. Normally people start at 6. So anyways, my nurse ended up coming in and turning down the pitocin. I didn't even say anything to her, but she turned down the pitocin because it was so strong. So, word to the wise with your pitocin, if you're getting induced and you have to have pitocin, or you're just going to labor and they recommend pitocin for you, it was a great thing and it helped me through my labor, but definitely talk to them about the dosages because, some people, 6 may not do anything to them, but 6 may be way too much for you. So again, don't just go with what everybody else does because it's what everybody else does. But so they came and turned the pitocin down back to a 3, and around 3 o'clock, the nurse wanted to check me, but I told her I refused to have anybody check me except for the doctor because I don't want to be told again that I'm at a 9 or a 10 and I'm actually still at a 7 or an 8 and just be deflated all over again I just didn't want that to happen. So she finally convinced me to let her check me because the doctor was in surgery and he couldn't get out of surgery to come check me. And I was out of 10. So really excited. I could definitely feel, even with an epidural, I could feel the difference between a traditional contraction and oh my goodness, it's time to push contraction. So anyways, I went ahead and they decided to get me ready. I'll insert pictures here. This is where my sister really started to take some pictures, but I started pushing around 4 o'clock, so it took them about an hour to get everything set up. It was like something took over my body. I was so determined to push. I was so determined to not be wheeled into a C-section. I remember I laid down and I before had been like really trying to control my emotions and not be too emotional, and it just like this peace came over me. It was so wild. And my husband already had a playlist for me. He started playing music, which play music while you push. Seriously, it helped me so much. But so I had my very favorite music. I love Christian worship music, and so I listened to that. Whatever your jam is, go ahead and do it. And I was able to be completely in the zone and completely focused. There wasn't any, hysterics. I wasn't screaming. I was really surprised because, at this point we're approaching 56 hours of labor. So I pushed for about 45 minutes and I was able to have Hadley, and she was born at 4:47 p.m. on Thursday, June 13th. So anyways, that's my story, and it doesn't stop there. Actually, I'm also going to film for you guys and tell you about what happened after that. We actually didn't leave the hospital for an entire week after that. We ended up in the NICU, and so I really want to talk to you guys about that because that's something I never prepared for. But she's happy and healthy today, and we made it through labor. My words of advice for you, if you are someone that is nervous about labor like I was, you can totally do it, and it's not impossible. It's not the worst thing I've ever gone through. Honestly, I think there are other things that I went through that were worse. It definitely does try you, but it's something that you can totally do. And the thing that you need to remember is that you were totally made to do this. Your body was made to do this and to endure labor. People have given birth for thousands of years without doctors, without hospitals, without people who knew much more than to just carry on traditions that they've learned over the years. And so doctors are equipped to help you in the case that something happens. Majority of labors happen naturally. Majority of labors, have no complications. And so really go into it with a peaceful mind. I think that'll help you so much. If you're fearful when you go into labor, it's just going to make it more difficult. So whatever you do, if you are a person that prays, go ahead and pray. I prayed with my husband and it really helped me. If that's not what you're into, then do what you're into, and really just whatever will help you to stay focused, go ahead and do that. But anyways, thank you so much for listening about my labor and delivery story. If you're interested in part 2, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. I'm really excited to film more videos for you guys, and let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you'd like for me to film. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.